Welcome to Direct Supply's Continuing Education Webinar Series. Direct Supply offers monthly webinars on a variety of topics throughout the year. The topic for today is EMG Biofeedback in Rehab, a modality ready for mainstream. My name is Robin Malik, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. New this month, this webinar will include one speech-language pathology contact hour. It also includes one nursing contact hour, 1.2 physical therapy contact hours, one occupational therapy contact hour, and one complimentary administrator CEU approved by the NAB. If you have questions during today's presentation, simply use the chat feature to submit your question. Send it to me, Robin, the host. We will answer as many questions during and at the end of the webinar as possible. Please note the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary, depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting with qualified legal counsel. Today we are joined by Yorick Wijting, PT, DPT. Yorick received his degree in physical therapy in the Netherlands and is DPT at the University of St. Augustine in Florida. He has practiced physical therapy in various care settings across Europe, South Africa, and the United States. He has extensive training and practical experience in biophysical agents and teaches nationally and internationally to medical professionals on their therapeutic use. Yorick has been instrumental in promoting and developing the use of electrical stimulation by speech-language pathologists in the treatment of dysphagia, teaching the method in over 20 countries worldwide. Recently, he has spearheaded the development of an sEMG and electrical stimulation combination device, the VitalStim Plus. Yorick lives in California and independently provides clinical consulting services to clinicians and healthcare facilities seeking to maximize their clinical outcomes through the development of clinical programming and improvement of clinical competency. And now, please welcome Yorick.
Thank you, Robin. Hello, everybody. I hope you can see my camera, and although you don't have to look at my face, but later on it will be useful because we're going to do a demo and you'll be able to see what I'm doing. But otherwise, the slides will provide you with the information that we're going to share. So thank you, Direct Supply. Thank you, Robin, for putting this up and for inviting me to participate. The topic of today, as you instructed or as you introduced already, is the use of EMG biofeedback. EMG biofeedback is a way for a clinician to provide and acquire data about what the patient is trying to do. The patient is attempting a movement, is attempting a contraction. That is captured. That effort is captured by the device and then turned into a number, a picture, and a sound. The picture and the sound are going to be useful for the patient to see because now they're independently getting an idea of what their muscles are doing, which might be hard otherwise. And it is very useful for the clinician to see whether the patient is actually doing the right thing. And more importantly, they get a number. And with that number, they can now quantify the progression of the patient. They can get a sense for whether this patient is really getting better or worse, etc. So there's lots of applications for this. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're not seeing your slides. Could you share them with the group, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Apologize. Let me just see here. Share my desktop. That would be useful. Here we go. Can you see me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I hadn't really moved on to any slide. This was all that I was staring at for all of you. So we're going to get into a description of this modality, what it is, how it works, what is the benefit for its use in rehab, especially in long-term care. And then we're going to do a demo and show how to actually execute that. I've hooked myself up on my arm here with electrodes so that I can actually demonstrate to you what I would be doing with a patient. So let's get going. Oh, and as we go, please let's make this as informal as possible with a webinar format. So you have a chat option in this webinar. You can just click on the chat button and a chat box window will open up and you can type your question and then address it to Robin, the host for this webinar, and she will collect all the questions as we go. I will stop halfway through this presentation and address some of the questions, and then at the end, we'll leave some time open as well for questions. Okay, let's get going. So we're first going to tackle what is surface EMG, how and why is it used, and should it be used in long-term care rehab. I'm going to make the case for several specific clinical examples, and then, as I said, we'll do a demo and we'll address some questions. So what is EMG? What is surface EMG? It is essentially the study, the observation of muscle function and muscle activity through the inquiry of electrical signals that are emanated by the muscle. If you look at the image here on the left, you have a muscle fiber that is innervated by a neuron. That neuron arrives on the muscle fiber at what is called the motor end plate. The action potential that travels through the neuron is then transferred to the muscle membrane and spreads. So there's an electrical event that spreads over the muscle, over the length of the muscle, over the length of the muscle fibers. That electricity is measurable. We all know it from ECGs, from electrocardiograms, or even EEGs when it's done for the brain, or anywhere where there is electricity, it is measurable if you have the right tool. So in the case of this particular application, we are going to be monitoring that activity by placing electrodes over the muscle that we are interested in. So this can then be, or the choice of muscle is going to be made by you, of course, depending on what you want to improve in the patient. But at its very core, this is what it is. There's electricity inside the body, in the muscle that you are interested in, and that electricity we're measuring in order to get an idea of what it is doing. Is it working? Is it working harder than a minute before? How is it all going? So that's EMG, surface EMG. As such, it is an objective tool for assessment and diagnosis of muscular electrical activity in health and disease. Meaning, I can now actually objectively tell whether this muscle is working or not and how hard it is working. Without this tool, it is much harder to determine objectively what is going on. Now, I have grading scales, of course. As a therapist, I can say this quadriceps is a muscle strength 4 out of 5 or whatever I deem it to be. But those tools are often not very objective and also not very reliable. So from session to session, I may be grading this muscle strength a little bit differently. Here, though, I have an objective idea. It's very objective. The machine just records the electrical activity and assigns a number, and that number is accurate. Okay. Secondly, I can monitor/measure the muscle activity non-invasively through surface electrodes. I don't have to poke a needle into that muscle with surface EMG. Of course, there are ways of poking a needle in there and measuring that electricity, but that's not what we're going to be doing in rehab. Third, these signals are measured and displayed on the screen and then amplified in auditory and visual signals. I will now get visual, sorry for the typo here, it says visual, but visual and auditory feedback for the patient and the clinician. Now, for the patient, that is useful because now a muscle that they are not fully aware of, they can suddenly see, and they say, oh, that's what I'm doing, and that will then amplify their effort. For the clinician, it's very useful because they can see, since they know which muscle they're monitoring, they can see that the muscle indeed is contracting, whereas without that, how would you know? You might be palpating or you might be looking at the contraction, but sometimes these are so subtle that it is really hard to detect. Now with the machine, you will know. So all of that together means you can use it in 3 principal ways. Number 1, evaluation. Evaluation at the beginning and the end of a series of sessions, or evaluation within a session, during a series of sessions. I will, at any point in time, I will be able to get a number, get an impression of what I'm doing, of what is going on. The second area where EMG is very useful is for uptraining. And I would argue that together with evaluation, that is probably as used as much as uptraining as in evaluation. Uptraining is this. Uptraining is where you encourage the patient to increase their effort level. I am encouraging the patient to work against a certain threshold, as I'll demonstrate later, and I'll encourage them to work towards that threshold and exceed it. So try harder. You see that line, patient? Will try and contract so hard that your curve is going to go above that line. The third area, which is not used as much but still very effective, is down training. This is used in areas of spasticity or hypertonus. I can tell a patient there, do you see that activity level? That is your muscle. It is too active. We need to train you to relax that muscle. And then you see that line? Now relax, breathe deeply, try and bring this activity level down. As I say, definitely in my practice, the down training part I have used, but not as much, still works very well, is primarily the first two pieces, evaluation and up training. They are the most useful. So if you look at the picture on this slide, you'll have the different representation modes that surface EMG provides. At the top, the blue squiggly lines, you see what we call the raw EMG data. This is essentially everything the machine is capturing. Now, you could display it like this to a patient, but it's not quite as useful. So instead, what the machine does, it first of all rectifies the signal, meaning every excursion below the line, it flips to the top. So now you end up with this red line. It's still very squiggly, but it's a little bit easier to see, and the signal is a little bit bigger, or the image is a little bit bigger. And then finally, it smooths it out. It makes it all a little bit more visually appealing, visually effective. So the envelope of this red line is now drawn, and the machine displays the effort as a single line, showing a bigger line or a bigger peak representing a bigger activity level. So that's what EMG is. Now, as I said earlier, we can do EMG by either putting electrodes on the muscle like we're doing today and what we're talking about today, or you could use a needle or a wire and stick it directly into the muscle. Now, there's certain pros and cons of each. For surface EMG, the biggest benefit is that it's non-invasive. You don't have to actually go through the skin. That does mean, though, that it is less specific to an individual muscle. If I put electrodes here, I will be monitoring all the muscles down there. It is not specific to one particular muscle. However, it is more specific or more representative of a muscle group. If I were to stick a needle in an actual muscle, I get a good indication of that muscle, but not so much of the muscles around it as a muscle group. So when I'm talking about extension, as we're going to do during the demo, extension as produced by the extensor group, then surface EMG is really a better choice for me if I want to use EMG as a modality. It is also a more accurate representation of actual muscle force generation. I can take this signal and I can say this bigger signal probably means this patient is trying harder and producing more force. And finally, the downside, this method, although the technology nowadays is very sophisticated and very effective at filtering out noise, there are more movement artifacts. So I'm capturing some other things that kind of pollute the signal a little bit. However, we can deal with that. It's not a deal breaker. Now, in rehab specifically, in long-term care and any other rehab really environment, there is two unique benefits that EMG offers that are very hard to replicate with any other modality. Now, that's not to say that it is better than other modalities, but there's just two unique things that are provided by EMG that make it useful, very useful in long-term care. First one, feedback. Feedback to the patients gives you a treatment environment, a treatment dynamic that is hard to replicate. Now, as a therapist, without EMG, I will provide feedback to the patient all the time. If I say to him, reach forward and try and open your hand to get to the cone, I will tell them verbally, yes, good effort, good job. That is feedback, of course. I will use my hand to provide feedback. I will use their eyes. They look at it to provide feedback. All of that is feedback. However, in stroke rehab, the more feedback typically you provide, the better things go. So any tool that gives me more feedback will be useful. Here, you will have a very powerful way to show, to visualize what the patient is doing, what the muscle is doing, and the patient will be able to work with that. So I am dramatically increasing feedback, which will immediately translate in better outcomes. And that's guaranteed. I have seen this over and over and over again. With this tool, I get better outcomes than without this tool in certain patient populations. The second biggest benefit is, and that may be the biggest one, I don't know, is data. I get a number. With that number, I can now quantify progress. I can actually show a payer or an auditor. I can show them that when we started treatment, this is what this patient was able to do. It was this, the number was this high, and now after 12 sessions, the number is this high. I will be able to show a graph that is all objectively established by this tool. This is going to be useful in all kinds of rehab environments, in long-term care just as much. I can now finally show my referral source, my payer. I can show them this is what is going on, this is what we're doing, and see, I need to continue doing it. So those are the two big benefits. Now, why would I want to do EMG? Why would I want to provide feedback? The first important thing is that feedback improves motor skill. By being able to see what I am doing with my muscle, I'm able to modify what I'm doing with that muscle. When I see it's going this high, I can actually put in more effort and increase that even further. For patients with impairments, this feedback has to be increased. You and I, who are walking around in normal daily life without impairments, we might not need that to live. Well, we do not need that, at least not from a machine. We could use it to increase our performance level, like in this picture. This lady here is doing some crazy moves. She must be working for a circus or something, but she's doing some crazy move to illustrate the point. There are certain sensors attached to her. Those sensors are relayed to this machine, to the laptop. So she now knows what she is doing. She has a visual of what she is doing. That helps her increase the recruitment of her muscles. But for patients, this is essential. It really helps them get better. Now, for this to be effective for a patient, there's three ingredients of feedback that need to be present. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be timely. Accurate meaning this line really does represent that muscle's work or activity. Reliable meaning whenever you see the number, it is a reliable measurement. It reliably measures that. It's the same thing every single time you look at the number. And the last one, which I find particularly important, it's timely, meaning the feedback is there immediately in real time. You can see what you're doing. As a therapist, when I, for example, try and work on the gait of a patient, and I'm holding onto the gait belt and I'm giving them little tugs in order to correct their posture during gait. Well, those little tugs are cues, but they also follow a certain movement that he or she was doing wrong. So as they stumble, boom, there comes the tug. That is feedback, and it is timely, but it is a split second after the error was made. So I'm always a little bit too late. I'm always a little bit out of sync with the actual movement pattern that I'm trying to correct. This EMG, this machine-driven feedback, fixes that because it gives the feedback immediately. As the muscle is failing or not working hard enough, the machine tells the patient immediately, hey, check that. Now, there's a very vivid example that I want to highlight that I encountered early on, which really made me appreciate the value of feedback more. And this is not about surface EMG, but feedback. There was in our clinic, I work in an inpatient rehab clinic at the time, and there was in our clinic a neurological patient who, he was a pusher, as illustrated in this picture. He leaned over, so internally his sense of what was upright was disrupted, and he kept pushing against the therapist. Now, the therapist, of course, pushed him back, and the nurse and whoever was helping him, but that tended to aggravate the situation. He then pushed further, because to him, over there was neutral. Over here, straight up, was not neutral. He was falling, in his mind, falling over there. And no matter what the therapy team was trying to do, He was not my patient, but we were all observing him. Whatever the therapy team was trying to do, it really wasn't working. There was a student who then rigged up a simple little EMG, simple little feedback device. He used to be an engineer in his first prior life, and he rigged up a little box that he mounted on the chest of the patient, and inside that box was a little semicircular tube with a mercury bubble in it, and he put two switches at the end so that when the patient leaned over one way, the mercury would make contact with the switch, and it would then make a light come on mounted in the visor of a baseball cap. So he put the baseball cap on the patient, and as soon as the light on the right came on, the patient knew, I'm leaning. And then he was instructed, try and avoid the lights to come on. Make the light stay off. The progress in this patient was amazing. It was very quick, it was very immediate. Therapy moved into a new realm, into a new area immediately. Why? Because he got reliable, timely, accurate feedback for the first time. Feedback that was very, very hard to deliver to him by a therapist all the time. So that's just to illustrate the power of feedback. Now, there are plenty of examples in the literature that confirm that feedback can improve outcomes. In this instance, I just pulled out one study, but there are many, many more. This is about low back pain. There were 30 subjects in whom the therapist thought, or the researcher thought, if we do stabilization of the trunk, stabilization exercises, this will help their low back pain. And so they compared two groups. One group that received EMG to enhance those stabilization exercises, to make them more accurate, to show the patient, here's what you're doing with your muscles. And then a group that did not get EMG, they just did the exercises. And it showed that at 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks measurements, their pain and their endurance in their muscles was better in the group that received EMG than in the group that did not receive EMG. So the bottom line is feedback, when using it with EMG or when provided by EMG, is a way to improve muscle performance. And that leads to better outcomes, in this case, endurance and pain. Now, what does the EMG signal represent? It is the relative level of recruitment of the muscle tissue. So everything under the electrode is being measured. These are action potentials, and it is a very small number. It's in the microvolt range. So it's not a very loud noise. However, the machine amplifies it so it's more than enough for the machine to give accurate feedback. When you get that number, as a clinician, you need to interpret it. And there's a couple of important pointers that I want to bring up. First of all, when you get that number, when you see that line, you should always, as a clinician, compare it to what you are seeing clinically. So it's never a standalone thing. You're always going to compare it clinically to what you're seeing so that you can tell what is noise, what is not, etc. Second, the amplitude, the number, the line is going to be influenced by many variables, like the dryness of the skin, like the hydration level of the patient, etc., etc. That means that the norms, everybody's always asking, well, if I'm looking at the quadriceps for knee extension, do I have a normal number? So I put it on my patient and he is showing me 50 microvolts. Is that normal or not? Are there norms? Well, there are norms, but they are usually of a very big range because of this particular problem. So norms are a very limited value. What is usually needing to be done is to compare or interpret the variations in the signal within the individual client and mainly within the actual session. Fourth, because electrode placement varies from day to day, comparison of the EMG amplitude from session to session is of limited value. Now, you will see, for example, today a number that is this high, tomorrow a number that's a bit higher, and that may make you think, ooh, things are improving. And then the next day it's suddenly lower. Forget about all that. Track it by all means, and then over time, 12, 14, 20 sessions in, you will see an upward slope overall. You'll see a trend line that increases. Now, that is reliable. You can trust that. However, exactly from session to session, not quite as valuable. The final note, the number itself, and we don't have time today to go into great detail about this, but the number itself of the EMG signal is not necessarily an indication of improved muscle function. There are things that can make the number go up. What it is a reliable indicator of is muscle effort. If I try harder, I will get a number that goes up. If I stop trying harder, the number will go down. Okay, there's different ways that people use in order to evaluate muscle function, and that is, I'm going to give you the three main ones. First of all, I can ask them to do a number of maximal contractions, maximal voluntary contractions, and then take their maximum effort and the average effort. That is a number that I can compare from session to session. Or I can say, patient, please perform a number of normal functional contractions. Go forward and reach that glass and bring it to you. Okay, put it down. Do that again and do that again. Or swallow and relax. Swallow again, relax. So depending on where you put the electrodes, you're going to get an indicator of their normal recruitment level. Again, take their max, take their average, compare that from session to session. I could also say, patient, I'm going to create a threshold for you that is close to your max, and I want you to increase and hold, or increase a couple of times. See if you can increase it. And then I can record their ability to work against their maximum for a set number of repetitions. So there's a number of methods that we use in order to measure the muscle activity. Now let's move on to equipment. There's a variety of pieces of equipment that are available, and some of those are handheld, some of those are much larger clinical devices. On this screen, you see a couple of examples. The one on the left is a Direct Supply, the host of this webinar. They have it under the Panacea brand name. It has an EMG component. It also has other modalities like electrotherapy and ultrasound. But the EMG component in here is fairly sophisticated, great tool. In the middle at the top, you see this device that Robin earlier mentioned when she introduced me, the VitalStim Plus. This is what we're going to use today to demonstrate quickly how to put this into practice. The one at the right at the top here is similar to the one on the left. It's called the Neo. It's a more advanced version of this Panacea device. And then there's a couple of handheld devices. Some of them super sophisticated, others, like the one at the right at the bottom, as basic as a simple LED line. The higher the line, the higher the lights go up, the more the effort is. And there's a real place for these simple devices. So, point that I'm making, there is a multitude of devices on the market that you could do EMG with. Now, let's look now practically, clinically, where in long-term care would you use this? There are three big groups of patients where you should use EMG. The first, stroke rehab. Stroke rehab for the upper extremity or lower extremity. These muscles are innervated by a cortical area that is now damaged. So the stroke damaged the part of the cortex. As a result of that, signals are no longer going down to these muscles. As a result of that, the patient shows with hemiparesis. What will fix this stroke patient? Repetition, repetition, repetition. I need to make this patient practice their muscles. What is that going to do? It is going to create a process or stimulate a process that we call cortical reorganization. The cortex will start looking for other areas of itself to control the muscles that were previously controlled by areas that are now dead or damaged. So this cortical reorganization process, it's a fascinating process. It requires practice. And we now know from research, feedback tremendously helps and promotes this activity. So for the stroke patient, feedback is a great idea. The other big group is total knee replacements. Total knee replacement where one of the key problems is a decreased ability to recruit the quadriceps. The quadriceps, if it doesn't recruit properly, may make this patient more prone to falling, which of course is not a good thing. So since there's a sizable amount of these patients in long-term care, that is a good group. And then the third group, dysphagia. Now many of these patients with dysphagia have dysphagia because of a stroke, so it kind of belongs to the first group. But it's not only stroke that can cause dysphagia. The problem with dysphagia is that these muscles over here are not muscles that you're aware of. If I have a problem with my swallowing muscles and they're weak because I've had a stroke, the therapist can tell me, come on, try and contract harder, but it's really hard because I don't know what's going on there. It's hard to visualize, hard to actually make connection with this musculature. The other part that makes dysphagia a very interesting population to work with is that the ability of the brain to reorganize around these functions is way, 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 way better than it is to reorganize around hand function and lower extremity function. The stroke patient or the stroke which has caused dysphagia in this patient is likely to, or the patient, the dysphagia, is likely to resolve if it is as a result of a stroke because of what I just said. The cortical reorganization is that spectacular. Okay, so I'm going to quickly flesh these out, and then we're going to get into a demo. So in the case of upper extremity stroke, this is what it would look like. The goal that I as a therapist have to promote this, or to work with this patient, is to promote hand and wrist extension, to improve functional task practice, like reaching and grasping activities. I want to work with this patient, and I want to make it so that I can actually make him work functionally. The problem, however, there is no efferent flow. There's nothing coming from the brain because the brain has damage to it. How do I fix that? The solution, I want to promote cortical reorganization. I want to promote this process that the brain is engaging in through sensory strategies and repetitive task practice and feedback. I want in my therapy to put a lot of sensory input. I want to give them a lot of feedback, and I want to make them practice a lot. Why? Because these three elements have been shown in the research to really promote cortical reorganization. So what strategy am I going to use to achieve that? sEMG biofeedback, and I could even use EMG-triggered stimulation, where the EMG, the effort of the patient that he's putting in, will actually trigger a stimulation of electricity delivery, which will make the muscles contract. So together, I will get more functional task practice. So I'll do this during functional task practice. In the case of dysphagia, I have a similar scenario. My goal, I want to promote swallowing muscle recruitment to improve the safety and effectiveness of the swallow. If I don't do that, the patient is at risk because stuff is going down into the lungs. They're aspirating their food. That means I can't allow them to have that food as a therapist. Therefore, they are now on a restricted diet, which limits their muscle activity. So it's the catch-22. I would love to practice with this patient, but he can't because it's not safe. The problem that I'm having, if I wanted him to practice, is that, again, there's no efferent flow. Therefore, the risk of aspiration is high. What do I use? What must I do? What is my solution? Promote cortical reorganization, which, as I said before, is much more likely to happen here than elsewhere, by doing the same thing: sensory strategies, repetitive task practice, and feedback. And I'll use the same strategy. EMG triggered stim during functional activities, like in this image, during swallowing. Here you see the patient hooked up to the device, and they are swallowing, they're taking a sip, and they're looking at the screen while they do so. They see the line, they see how hard they've just contracted their muscle. That gives them a sense of satisfaction, it gives them feedback. And then finally, and I apologize, this was not in the slides that you may have received as handouts, I just added it. The total knee replacement, here you see this ugly knee on the left. They have pain, they have swelling, which inhibits the recruitment of the VMO, especially in terminal extension. That creates a full risk element. What is my solution? Promote recruitment of that muscle by inhibiting pain and by giving them feedback. This is what you're doing. You don't have to be scared of contracting that muscle. Come on, contract it harder. My strategy, I'm going to use EMG and EMG-triggered stim during functional task practice. That could be standing. It could be lying on the bench and doing actual extensions with the knee over a roller. There's a variety of ways I can actually do functional task practice, but the modality really helps. Okay, so there's a particular procedure. I'm going to skip over that because I want to, for the sake of time, go right into the demo, and then we'll go back towards these towards these slides. Actually, let me mention this one real quick. When you place electrodes, as you'll see I've done on my arm, you will use 3 different electrodes, which is unlike electrical stimulation. People often, when they use EMG, they think of electrical stimulation, and you're obviously not putting electricity into the muscle. You are listening to the muscle producing electricity coming out towards the electrodes. So you'll use 2 electrodes that are connected to the muscle group that you want to observe, and then you'll use a 3rd one, which in this image, which I just got from the internet, is right here at the bottom, the one that is labeled reference. So somewhere on the body, there needs to be a 3rd electrode. That 3rd electrode is used by the machine to tell what is noise versus what is genuine activity of the muscle. Okay. And then lastly, on this slide, there's this last bullet, which is really important. When you use EMG, make sure, obviously, you use a good piece of equipment that can filter things properly, and then use good electrodes so that there's as little noise as possible. But what has often helped, in my experience, add a little drop of water on the electrode before you put it on the skin. It gets rid of a lot of noise issues. Okay, when you start, you do a coaching session, but as I say, let me skip over this and we'll get to that when we do the demo. So I'm going to go now into the demo. I'm going to change my program here. So what I'm going to use now, I'm going to use the device that you saw in the images earlier. Let me just get this pulled up here. And the device is the VitalStim Plus. This VitalStim Plus was designed for dysphagia rehab, but the same method, the same technique really applies to any particular muscle group or any technology that would be out there. They use the same principles. So you see on this device, there are 2 lead wires coming out. One is a single little white lead wire. The other one is a blue lead wire. The white lead wire, in this case, is the reference electrode. The reference electrode I have connected on my arm. This electrode is just so the machine can effectively filter out noise. The blue lead wire is connected to these 2 electrodes. These are my live recording electrodes. These are the ones that are going to listen to the muscle. They're going to actually get a sense of this is what the muscle is doing. So let me just do this one more time. While I get this up and running, Robin, do you want to tackle a couple of questions?
I do not see any so far. If anyone does have questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A features on the side of your WebEx.
Okay, great. Then in the meanwhile, I am going to get this up again. One thing that people often ask about EMG is it reimbursed? Here we go. Is it a tool that can be reimbursed like any other tool? And the answer is yes. I'll have a slide about that in the end. So I'm going to click on my EMG button, and you now see on the left side this horizontal bar representing my muscle activity. So I'm not recruiting, I'm not doing anything. So you'll see my signal being 10 or below, hovering around there. Any muscle at rest is producing some electrical activity. If I contract, I see the bar rise, and I get much more noise, much more electrical activity. If I relax, it goes back down. If I try harder, that number becomes higher. You see there, I'm in the 400 range, and then I drop. If I'm weak, I will see a low amount of electrical activity. So the amount of muscle activity that I, as a patient, have is visible on the screen. So right here, I'm already receiving feedback about what I'm trying. If I just stayed here and I said to the patient, do you see that line in the middle, that orange line? Try and contract your muscle so hard that you exceed that. And then when you exceed it, the machine will give you a little beep. That would be a very basic form of feedback. Now, you'll see the button that says Target Max, and below that, Capture Target. If I click on Capture Target, I will do something, I will demonstrate now, doing something that I would do every single session with my patient. I'll say begin capture, and I say, now patient, reach for this glass. So I'm reaching and I'm going back. Okay, good. Do that again. Reach for that glass. If you can grab it, great, and relax. And do that one more time. Reach for that glass. Okay, excellent. Now let's stop. I click on end capture. What have I just done? What has the machine just done? As I produced these normal functional activities, the machine monitored how much noise was being produced by the muscle. It has displayed that right here at the top of the bar. 226 microvolts was the maximum effort produced by my muscle during these 3 attempts. I now am taking this, I as a clinician, am taking this to be my threshold for today. It is a number that I will write in my chart, in my notes. That number becomes the baseline for what I'm doing with this patient today. So I'm imagining this is a stroke patient. So I will click the check mark in the center to accept this as the threshold. I will then change the screen to this visualization, and you'll see this 226 on the left in the middle of the screen right there. That is my threshold. Now I'm saying, patient, you see that glass? We just did that test earlier. Reach for it again while you look at the screen. Okay, I'm reaching and I'm relaxing. So I'm saying, patient, do you see that line there? Do you see that little bump? That is the muscles that we're working on. These are the muscles that we want to make stronger. Do you see that line in the middle? This is the best you've done when we started the session. Now I would like you to try harder. I would like you to put in your heart. Put your heart into it. Put your muscles into it. Ready, set, go. Open your hands. Come on, come on. Yes, good job. And now he put in an effort. Try it again. Come on, come on, come on. No, you didn't get it. You lazy son of a gun. Come on, put your heart into it. Try harder. There you go. Good. That was the second one that you did really well. Do it again. And excellent. That was the third one. So my session is now going to be this kind of play with the patient and with the screen. I will hit the start button, and you see the number has now turned red. As soon as I hit the start button, everything that this patient is doing is now being recorded. That will give me the number that will give me an indication of whether this patient is doing well or not. Now, patient, try again. Yes, good job. Oh, you're learning. It's getting better. Try again. Very good. Those are number 5. And again. Number 6. If he gets tired and I see he's starting to fail, so for example, he does a number of these efforts that are actually below the line, I will say, okay, you're clearly getting tired. I do not want that negative experience of failing, so I'm going to touch the screen. I'm going to lower this line a little bit. I'm going to make it easier for you. Are you ready to go? Go again. Yes, good job. And again, good. At the end of the session, what I will do, I'll hit stop, and then the machine will show me data. And this is the beauty of EMG. I love this part. In this particular machine, but all the machines will give you similar stuff. In this particular machine, you see an indication of the threshold. That was that line. I started with the threshold in this example of 226. Then I went down to 148, so that gives me an average of 207. If I monitor that number every single session, I will see an upward trend. As this patient is getting better, he's able to work against a bigger number. Then I see the max work and average work. This is the peaks that he produced above that line. The maximum number in this example was 430. The average number was 270. Again, especially that average number will show an upward trend as we go. And there's more numbers than these, of course, but those are 2 numbers that are very commonly tracked in order to quantify progress. Now, I can't overemphasize how useful this is for documentation for payers, for documentation for referral sources, even for marketing purposes. You can go and visit a physician or a hospital service, a discharge planner, and say, look, this is how we are tracking our patients, and this is how these numbers correlate to these outcomes. Very, very, very powerful stuff. So I'm going to leave that demo for here. I'm going to quickly switch back to the slide and then leave some time for question and answers. So let me get rid of this one and pull my slides back up.
All right. Yorick, we do have a question.
Okay.
Is there an easy way for this information to transfer into my EMR system?
Yes, so that depends on the machine that you use. With this machine, yes, it is easy. You have the ability to capture all these numbers on a card and then transfer it, if you wanted to, through a USB slot. In this particular case, it could even go via Bluetooth connection straight into your computer. There's also a piece of software that goes with this piece of equipment that will capture these numbers in much more detail and export them to a CSV or a spreadsheet. And all of that, if your EMR software accommodates it, can then be imported into your EMR. At this point, I do not know of any equipment that is already set up to synchronize automatically with your EMR, but I know people are working on that. So it's a bit of a manual process. You take it, you export it, and then you import it, but it is possible. So this line right here is the line that I was referring to, that over time, even though from session to session it will go up and down, but over time you will see a trend line of that is representative of improvement. There is in your slides a protocol that is specifically for the swallowing world, really useful. This is where in the researcher actually used the EMG as a way to trigger electrical stimulation to rehab the swallow. Very effective. And then lastly, I want to talk about reimbursement before we go into questions and before I hand back over to Kelly. Reimbursement is there. These are the codes, the CPT codes. Depending on how you code and how you document your session, you may use CPT codes or not. But there's two different CPT codes applicable. 90901 is when it's used for the extremities or anything that is not incontinence, and 90911 is when it's for incontinence, used for incontinence. Very effective way. I don't know that it's used much in long-term care, but in outpatient PT, this is used a lot, and it's, again, very effective. The 90901 is the one that is used more often in the upper extremity. Now, if you look at the last bullet, it is covered. This is language that comes from the payers. It is covered for muscle rehab of specific muscle groups or for treating pathological muscle abnormalities of spasticity, incapacitating muscle spasm or weakness, and more conventional treatments such as heat, cold, massage, exercise, sport have not been successful. This therapy is not covered for treatment of ordinary muscle tension states or for psychosomatic conditions. So it pretty much covers most conditions that you would be treating. They do have this clause where it says more conventional treatments must have not been successful. If you were ever audited on that, you probably will have to show that more conventional treatments had been tried before. So anyway, just FYI, this is the language that is in the reimbursement work or in the reimbursement language by the payers. If it is used in long-term care Part A, of course, you're not necessarily worried about CPT codes. You're worried about time. The time that you spend using EMG as a tool is, in other words, fully countable. These are reimbursable therapy minutes. You do not add any time. You do not get any extra reimbursement for using this tool, obviously, but it's regular time that counts towards your minutes. In your Part B environment, it's the CPT codes. The 90901 is a timed code, so it's untimed, meaning you get the amount of money for 90901, whether you use it for 30 minutes or for 60 minutes. Okay, now I'm going to leave it open for Q&A. I believe Kelly wants to share some comments, but let's have it. Any questions?
All right. The first question we have is, are there any contraindications for using surface EMG?
None whatsoever. Zero. And that is because there's no addition of energy, no electricity being added to the patient. So none, which is beautiful.
Okay, sounds good. That's the only question we have so far. Feel free to ask additional questions if you have any, and we can come back to them after Kelly does her part. As a quick reminder, by attending this month's webinar, you'll receive 1 speech language pathology contact hour, 1 nursing contact hour, 1 physical therapy contact hour, 1 occupational therapy contact hour, or 1 administrator CEU. To receive your final certificate and contact hour, you must fill out the follow-up survey, and I'll put that link in the chat feature shortly, and it'll also be emailed to you tomorrow. Please note, if you're watching as a group, you must each fill out the survey to receive your certificate. The survey is given to get your feedback on the webinar and also confirm that you attended the session. You'll have 1 week to complete the survey, and then you will receive your final certificate of completion within 2 weeks. And now for anyone who's interested in learning about the sEMG products that DirectSupply offers, please help me welcome our awesome Senior Product Consultant, Kelly Sullivan.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for sticking around. I wanted to show a couple products today that have surface EMG incorporated into them as a modality that you can utilize. So the 3 pieces that you see in front of you here are all manufactured as a Chattanooga product, one here being a co-branded system. And these 2 devices are going to actually provide you with electrical stimulation and ultrasound. That can be used simultaneously as well. And then they have the ability to have either laser therapy incorporated into it, and surface EMG is already baked into both systems. And then we have the Vital Stim Plus that Yorick had provided a nice demo for you on over here, and I'm just going to show you the interface and some of those tools that you can find on this system here as well. So first, let's start off with the Vectra Neo over here to the right, or I guess maybe your left. This is a really interesting piece, very unique to the market in that it's extremely intuitive. It has a trainer baked into the box, so it's going to allow for your therapist to navigate through the system and find the right treatment based on location of the body and indication as well. You have electrotherapy, ultrasound combination, and here's that surface EMG. So lots of choices for modalities. If we go into surface EMG, I'm just going to show you your options here. You can choose standalone surface EMG or surface EMG tied in with the eStim. So if we go to surface EMG here, I'm just going to show that threshold that Yorick had talked through, showing you your bar, your graph here, which is going to give a nice feedback for your patient, so that interaction can take place and allow for you to establish max targets just by going to customization and allowing for some editing of those parameters. When you go into some of these tools over here, which I find very helpful, it's going to give you some information on communication with your other therapist. So let's say tomorrow, you might not be around tomorrow. You might be out of the office, and another therapist is going to be working with that same patient. I can communicate with them. I can save this treatment out. I can tell them exactly where their pain was at. So if you are utilizing the eStim component, I can show them where I put the electrodes, where the affected pain points were for the individual, or the area that I was using the eStim on for the combination surface EMG eStim. So it's a great way to communicate with each other. And I especially like this too, that you can customize the parameters and really make it unique. So when we look at this particular device, I mentioned it's intuitive. Well, so much so that it's going to provide me with actual real-time pictures here of electrode placement. So you can see those 3 electrodes, that reference electrode. The system itself is going to come with that lead wire for you, so you don't have to make a separate purchase. It actually comes with it. Besides the traditional lead wires you use with electrotherapy. So you have that available to you. It also gives you some rationale here. So that, again, there's that trainer in the box component. So surface EMG is very easy to find and navigate through. And then I also wanted to point to, just to give you an understanding of custom protocols and what this system is fully capable of doing. So now I'm looking at, I want to treat a specific part of the body. This is for eStim or ultrasound. I'm going to treat the shoulder. I simply press the area on the body. I choose what indication it is that I am treating here. So pain management, hit the check mark. Is it chronic? Is it acute? It takes me to a couple different waveform options. So we'll go pre-mod. And then here, straight away, it takes me to a treatment. So I'm ready to go. Maybe I don't know where to put the electrodes, or here it gives me some great education on where I might find, or I should say, electrode guidance. You can go back here. Again, we have that same pain information that you can tap into, which is great for that communication. And then maybe the parameters aren't exactly what you want, so I can go to customize and I can change once again any one of those parameters, save it out to a custom protocol, so I can make this a patient-specific treatment. So you can save up to 200 different treatments on this device. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of customized, or I should say, clinical protocols that are already in the system for you to pull up. But I can also educate the individual on what I just did. So maybe I was treating the shoulder. It was a rotator cuff tear. So if I go to rotator cuff tear, I can show the individual exactly what's going on internally with them, or maybe I'm educating the family member and telling them this is what's happening with dad, and this is why we're using eSEM to help treat them. So there's great ways to educate and talk through each and every treatment with various different members of either the family, the patient, the doctor, what have you. And then lastly, I'll just point to the fact that you have this nice, on the interface, this ability to save out treatments that are easy shortcuts. So like an app almost. So it takes you straight away to a treatment that maybe you set up. That's a shortcut that takes you, that you don't have to go through and try to find them in the custom protocol app. I also want to mention that this has a USB port. So right up in the back here behind the machine, there's a connection for a key to be plugged in where you can capture that treatment data. And that's really important when we start talking about measurable outcomes and reimbursement. That's really where you're going to be finding the most bang for your buck in terms of data collection, is that it's going to be quantifiable data that you can grab from the machine, export it into your computer, copy paste it into your EMR. So to kind of go back off of what that question was for Yorick, yes, it is possible to do that on these systems. It isn't auto magic, but it does allow for you to capture that data in a manual way. All right. I'm going to move over to the Panacea Vector Genesis. This is co-branded with our Panacea branded here at Direct Supply alongside Chattanooga, who, I should say DJO Chattanooga, who manufactures the device. This is the first version prior to the Neo, so it's still has a lot of the same features in that you have your ultrasound, your electrotherapy, you have your clinical protocols here. I'm just going to go back to the home page here. These are all buttons, so it's not a touch screen, so that's a big difference. It does not have a USB port, so you're not going to be able to capture the data like you do on the Neo and export it into your computer system. It does save out the information though, so if you need to save out specific treatments, you can do so up to 200 once again. And you do have Surface EMG and Surface EMG STEM available as a modality on this device as well. Both systems are module, so we have a kind of a plug and play with the Neo over here. If I can turn it real quickly here, you can see that there are different module systems that just kind of slip into that slot and can be plugged in. So maybe I start off with 2 channels of eSTEM and that's all I want on this device initially. And then 6 months from now, my census increases or my patient caseload changes and I need to add 2 more eSTEM options. So we have 3 and a 4, or perhaps maybe I want to add ultrasound or laser therapy, which you can do as well on this device. I can just plug that in and order at it after I've already made that initial purchase. So it's real easy to manage. Also, if there ever happened to be an issue with one of the modules or an 1 and 2 channel eSTEM, all I have to do is contact my rep at Direct Supply, and they will send out, if it's under warranty and or even if it's not, we'll manage it for you on the back end, and we'll make sure that a new module is sent out to you rather than having to replace the entire system here. This too has a module stack system. It's a 2-stack system versus having the ability to have 5 different modules. So a little bit different. And so you're not going to be able to have as many options all in one. But again, because it is module, it makes it easier for you to order after the fact as well. So very, very intuitive, great pieces here. I think the key to talk to with both pieces is that it has a trainer in the box for you and allows for your therapist to easily get from A to B when we're talking about specific treatments, depending on the indication. And what I like about it is that you can just easily point to the area of the body you're treating, and it takes you straight away to a treatment. So Surface EMG easily found on the interface, the home page on both screens here, and they're going to look very similar to what Yorick showed you in that those thresholds that you would establish max targets for. All right, and then lastly, I'm going to point to that VitalStim Plus device. Just talk about a few different features on this. A lot of you probably have VitalStim or maybe the original VitalStim in your buildings today. So this is a little bit more advanced. I shouldn't even say a little bit, a lot more advanced in that it has that trainer in the box component. It has the ability to build out customizable treatments here. It has, let me go back. It has your clinical protocol, so I can go in and there's treatment already available for me to start and get ready and go. And it has Surface EMG as well as Surface EMG STEM for you to utilize as well. So you can see there's that. This is very similar to what you saw with the demonstration you saw earlier, but I just wanted to show you how you would find it. And then I wanted to talk about some of the additional tools here, and the tools are really what gives you the, some of these outcomes, and that it's, you're going to see more usage. You're going to see that therapists are going to have an easier time understanding various different treatments. So let me show you why I say that. I can go right into a video library here, and I can access any one of these videos, 2-minute, 3-minute tutorials that will give me a good reminder of a specific treatment that I might have been taught during my certification.
The increased effort.
So it's great that it's right there at my fingertips. I don't have to look anything up in a book. I don't have to find something on the web. It's right there in the box. And then the anatomical library, whether I'm talking to the patient or whether I'm talking to family member, whomever, or even a new therapist, I can show them some anatomical graphical images here and allow for some conversations around that education. And then as Yorick mentioned, this is connected to the Bluetooth. So I can show this on my computer. I can project on a TV. So again, as I'm interacting with the patient, they can see as they're engaged in that Surface EMG exercise, they can see that biofeedback on a larger screen. It's just going to be easier for them to be engaged and interact. But I also can use it as a learning tool and project when I'm talking to another therapist perhaps, or when I'm showing the device to another colleague or what have you. So it's a great little tool that you can utilize here. All right. If you have any additional questions on any 3 of these pieces, you can always reach out to your account manager here at Direct Supply, and they can put me in contact with you. I can always provide you with a deeper dive WebEx if that's of interest to you. We are here to help support you and help you fully understand the equipment that we have in our offering. And thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much to Yorick and Kelly for that great presentation. As Kelly said, if you have any questions about the products discussed, please reach out to your Direct Supply account manager. And for more information about upcoming webinars or to view past webinar videos, please visit directsupply.com/webinars. Once again, thank you for attending today.